Welcome to the Leadership 2.0 podcast. My name is Dirk Verburg and I believe that leadership is the most important differentiator between the success and failure of organizations. The reason is that leaders make a difference for their staff, the organizations they serve, and also for our society in general. The purpose of this podcast is to present interviews with thought leaders and practitioners in this space to inspire you to become the best leader you can be. In this episode, I'm interviewing Saskia Schepers about unleashing the power of neurodiversity in the workplace. Saskia Schepers is a Dutch national who studied organizational science at the Tilburg University and has over 25 years of experience in this field, especially in the corporate world in HR, leadership development, well-being, diversity and inclusion, as well as learning and development. She's frequently engaged as a creative brain, consultant, project manager, speaker, trainer or coach. She recently wrote a book titled Alle breinen werken, and an English translation could read, If all brains are switched on, why space for neurodiversity in the workplace benefits everyone. It is the first Dutch book on neurodiversity and is intended to help managers, HR advisors, as well as neurodivergent people and their colleagues to make the workplace brain-friendly or brain-friendlier. The book reached the #1 position in the Dutch bestseller list of management books, and personally I think this is completely justified. The book addresses all the important themes in this area, the argumentation is clear and compelling, and the statistics and references provide a strong scientific basis. Finally, the book strikes a good balance between an objective scientific approach and the personal experiences of the author. So Saskia, welcome to the podcast. I guess my first question is, congratulations with the success of your book. It's a #1 bestseller in the Netherlands. It's repeatedly sold out. It's reprint after reprint. Did you expect this success when you were writing the book?
Well, it depends. I knew this topic would be big. I knew the time was coming, and post-pandemic that people really realized that we are all different and we need different contexts to thrive. So I knew the audience could be big or wide, but you never know. You never know what makes a book a success. So, but what I thought that would happen, and it did, is that neurodivergent people would buy the book because they recognize things, and then they would give it to their manager or to a colleague to say, this gives language, the right language to what I want to tell, or, what they can't tell by themselves, or they didn't have the correct language. So, and this is exactly what happened. That sometimes managers call me and they say, my employee read your book and he or she gave it to me. And I was, I was impressed by it. And I want to have a conversation about how to help my employee to thrive. So, it's a big audience. You never know, but it turned out the way I expected. Yeah. And so did the publisher, otherwise they wouldn't invest in a project like this.
True.
Yeah.
Great. Hey, how would you define neurodiversity? And can you mention some of the labels we use to identify neurodivergent people?
Yeah, sure. Neurodiversity is a natural variety, like biodiversity, and in this case, in brain, mind, and wiring. There's no such thing as a standard brain or a standard tree or flower, but there are more common and less common brains. And less common brains is what you refer to as labels. I never talk about the word labels, but neurotypes, the type of brain. And the medical world, they labeled all these kind of brains and made it into a disorder, but it's not like that. It's just a normal variety. Yeah. And a good example is the hyperactive brain, which is now referred to as ADHD, which ends as disorder. But it's not a disorder. This is a kind of brain that was supposed to be here, and it will help us as a human species. Way back, these kind of brains were the hunters and farmers, or the hunters and gatherers, correct?
Yeah.
And they would seek food and shelter, which we needed as people. So they had a function. Like people, autistic people, I write that in my book, and you probably read it.
Yeah.
These were the kind of people that could see from far away are these shining things, berries or the eyes of a predator. That could mean the difference between eating or be eaten. So it has a function, but the context has changed, and neurodiversity is all about. It's a natural variety. We all need these kinds of brains, but we need to create the right context. That's neurodiversity in a nutshell.
Yeah, now that's a great definition and a great description. What I find interesting is that in your book you write that neurodiversity is a leadership issue. And I'm interested, why is it an issue for leaders? Is being neurodivergent not something that neurodiverse people need to learn to deal with themselves? Why is it an issue for their leader or the manager or their organization?
Of course, neurodivergent people, like everybody, has a responsibility to take care of yourself and make sure that you have the equipment to do your job. But these kind of people, they need a level of psychological safety. Like everybody, we know that's the most important thing in building a team, But for these people, it's even more important because they were raised in a school system that wasn't designed for them. So probably they heard their entire life, you're too slow, you're too quick, you're not sociable enough, you're too this, or it's always a disqualification. So as a leader, you need to create the right context to make people feel safe and acknowledged, and that we can make use of their talents. Because we talked about the word labels, but these are kind of people with a specific neurotype that creates talents like hyperfocus, like pattern recognition, data-driven thinking and working, creativity, innovative thinking, all kind of skills you really, really need in your company. But most of the time, these are neurodivergent brains, which need a different approach or a different work environment. And it's key for a leader to provide that. Mm-hmm. You have those skills, but then you need to provide the right context. And the standard context, the norm, and you're not aware of the norm if you fit into it, So,
correct. Yeah.
Really important for leaders to understand there's a norm. And maybe we should challenge that. Mm-hmm. What people fit in. So every kind of talent, this is scientific research said it, that if you have are you really good at something, it always comes with something that you're really not good in. That's really something that you need to work on. And most of the time, leaders focus on that. If I can share a personal story, I've heard my entire life, Saskia, you're so creative, but you spend more time with colleagues, or you should be more vivid in meetings, or whatever. And they always said, but. And
we always want to have the best of both worlds. Yeah.
Exactly. And it costs a lot of energy. It will never become my greatest asset, So just focus on what people are good at. We know that neurodiverse teams are way more productive than other teams with the same kind of brains. So it's a leadership issue. It's not a diversity issue because you already have these kind of people. Sometimes it ends with diversity, but it's not really a matter of diversity because you have these people in your company for sure, but you're probably not aware of it because of masking. They want to fit the norm, or they're ashamed, or they're scared of sharing their kind of thinking. So I think mostly it's a leadership issue because they have the means to create the right context.
Yeah, because in your book you also write that for a number of leaders it's also hard to deal with neurodiverse or divergent people in their organizations. What are some of the issues that leaders encounter when they have neurodivergent people in their teams?
Well, I think the main issue is that all kind of needs can be contradictory.
Mm-hmm.
So one person thrives on the inaction on the work floor and the house, and the other wants to work remote from, so they need a quiet space or things, the way of working or anything. So if it's contradictory, how are you going to handle that when people all have kind of different needs? So that can be a real challenge. Secondly, they're not always, sensitive to hierarchy. So as a leader, you really need to have a good argument and maybe scientifically proven or things like that. They don't take it, face value.
It's not because you have this position people accept. It's more like, what is the argumentation? What's the rationale behind it? And I think it's what you call the BS factor in your thinking. Yeah.
So they have a radar for that. So sometimes it can be challenging for leaders that they maybe do a step more to convince people of, I don't know, policy changes or things like that. And I think an important issue is that these kind of brains can be a black box. You never know what's working there. And I can share this from my own experience that people said, give me a status update on a project. And I just couldn't always tell because there were still things working in my head. So it could be a black box, and it makes leaders a bit nervous because they also have to give status updates to their leaders. So it can make a manager really uncomfortable.
And do you have any tips for managers who are, let's say, struggling with neurodivergent people in their teams? What are practical things they could do, for instance? Well,
it starts with the good state of mind. I think being curious is very important, and not always what you see is not always what you get. Some kind of you never know what kind of intentions are behind the behavior you see at employees. So be curious, ask questions, maybe share your observations, and trust that these people are willing and trying. And most of the time, neurodivergent people have really high intrinsic motivation. So if you keep that in mind, it's a different starting point than this employee is annoying me. Why doesn't he listen to what I say or comply to the way we work? It's a different starting point. You just be curious. How does this brain work? How can I make the best out of it?
Yeah, it's looking for strengths rather than, let's say, trying to fix certain characteristics that might be very hard to address. Yeah.
So going to look at things that are not working. Sometimes it takes all the energy and just think about what is the counterpart of this. If people behave in a certain way, what talent is behind it? And that can be hard work. I'm not saying that neurodiversity can be a hassle.
Yeah.
It can be time to invest in people to really understand how they think and what they need to be their best. But it will save time because, if you treat these people in a good way, or you work with them in a good way, you will prevent sickness or that they leave the company. So I think it takes some energy up front, but it will be paid back. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. I mean, I also led a recruiting team in my career, for instance, and it was led by a fantastic leader who was a super recruiter, but was very bad at anything to do with administration and planning. So that's what I did for her. And then I had a lot of comments from my line manager, in the sense, this person should basically be much better in planning and much better in administration. I said, there's two things. We can either try to put her in a box where she feels completely unhappy and cannot perform, or we can basically say she does a super job in recruiting and I handle the admin for her. I think that's for the company is by far the best combination. So yeah.
But we always have the standard profiles. We really want that people really fit in, and
It's for me very recognizable. I once wrote an article where I said, look, some of the development efforts that we invest in people and how we want to develop people is the same as to say, well, Mick Jagger is a good singer, but his drumming is worthless, so we should focus on his drumming. That's not, that's not using his strengths. That's basically focusing on a skill that he might have to develop, and all the effort and pain we need to invest in that basically prevents him from doing the things he's really good at. Sorry, go on, Saskia.
Yeah, it's what I write in my book about spiky profile. If you really want people who excel in things, then you probably need to organize things around them, exactly what you told about this colleague. That's the way it is. And if you can understand this and embrace that, you'll have happy employees, they will thrive, they will use their talents, and it will really benefit the company.
I'm sure. Hey, and another question is, as a leader, if you have the expectation that someone in your team, let's say, is to a certain extent bipolar, or suffers from or has an ADHD condition or whatever, what is the degree to which you can openly suggest or breach that in a conversation? Because it's quite difficult. On the one hand, it can help a leader because once he has this quote unquote label, he might be able to do some research, look it up, put conditions in place. On the other hand, it also feels like you put people in a box. Precisely the disadvantage of a label. To what degree do you recommend leaders to openly bring that up in a conversation, or should they avoid it altogether? What would be your guidance on that one?
Never ask people, do you have ADHD or things in you? Am I right? Never, because this is not about be open about labels or things like that. Neurodiversity is about how does this brain work? What kind of brain is this? Like I said, an ADHD brain is a hyperactive brain. And these are things you can observe. So you can say as a leader, I see in a meeting that you're really easily distracted. Am I seeing this right? Do you need anything? Or what do you need to be involved, or things like that?
So focus on concrete behaviors, not on generic labels, but concrete things that you can observe.
Exactly, because maybe these people has a diagnosis, but maybe don't. They're not aware of it. I've been talking to a lot of people, reading the book and then saying, oh, I think I really recognize myself in ADHD or bipolar, but I don't have a diagnosis. What is this? I said, you don't need a ticket. Which is to become part of the neurodivergent community. It's not about that. And sometimes I get the question, but Saskia, aren't we all neurodivergent? But keep in mind that there is a norm, and nobody fits exactly the norm. But there are brains that are really where the norm is really
they fit within the guardrails.
Yeah, exactly, and sometimes they really don't, and it costs a lot of energy. So focus on concrete behavior, because you never know what's behind it, and if people have stigmas, have this idea of a label. So never talk about that, because it's not about that. I hope that I can create new language that you can say. You don't even have to say I am neurodivergent, but I think that's one step further than ADHD or things like that. But I created a brain manual. I put it in the book also. Yeah. Download it. So I hope that people just can say, this is how my brain works. If I'm going to work here, this is what I need to thrive. Brain needs. When I started in a job, I said, I'm the creative kind of type. If you want to make use of me, maybe I won't always do what you ask, because I see things in a different way. Maybe I have this kind of hobby projects that you never asked for. So I really said, this is how I need to work. I'm really autonomous. Maybe I'm not always joining meetings if I don't see the value in it. And it worked out well. And I am bipolar, but I never said it. I didn't need to. I said, this is what I need. Sometimes I'm really energetic and sometimes
because otherwise it becomes almost a fight on your quote unquote label, or, am I this, am I that not? But I mean, you can, it's much easier to state your preferences in which you thrive.
So if people say, oh, should I open up about my label or neurotype? I said, you don't have to. I'm not asking that. I just want to create an opportunity to discuss with your manager or colleagues what you need to be your best self.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Hey, but one question, and it's going back a little bit to a topic we discussed earlier. Right now in the business world, a growth mindset is pretty much in vogue, right? Everyone needs to adopt a growth mindset and step outside his or her comfort zone. If you were to be critical, could you say to neurodivergent people in the sense of, well, it's basically there might be certain things that you find problematic, but adopt a growth mindset, go and address it, step outside your comfort zone. What do you think from such an approach?
Yeah, it's funny. I get that question a lot. Well, it's something that we discussed earlier. Yes, people can work on their weakness. Of course, and they can, people with ADHD, they sometimes create these habits or things that really help them out, their kind of time management. And people will learn things, and there's something called psychological education, that people really learn how to work with their weaknesses. But that said, if you're going to focus on things that people are not really good at, they might improve something, but their brain is just not optimized for that. So it will take a lot of energy.
Yeah. Really it's a little bit what Carl Jung said, the kind of, let's say, the things that we are not let's say good at, and partly, let's say, there are a shadow, and we somehow can work with it, but will never be brilliant at it. It's almost like if we force people to, for instance, write with their other hand. I mean, they can do it, but it's never going to be, let's say, as fast and let's say detailed as if they write with, their normal writing hand, for instance.
A good example for another reason, that back then we thought writing, being left-handed, was a disorder.
Yeah.
Disorder, and now you think, oh, what did we do to those children that had to learn to write with the right hand? That's just cruel.
Yeah.
So you can look at it like this: they will never excel in the things that are at the bottom of their spiky profile. They really can improve things and learn things, how to cope with their weaknesses, but it won't give them energy. It will be coping and not excel. Never. You have to pay the price that when people are really good at something, there's something they can improve, but it won't work out.
No, I fully agree with you. Hey, if I ask a couple of specific questions, one of the things that I found very interesting and also very provocative was in your book, but also in interviews. Right now, working in teams is in organizations seen as the only way to get work done, right? So you have to. So if there's an issue, there needs to be a team. What issues can this pose for neurodivergent people, and how can line managers, accommodate that? Because I can imagine that if you have an issue which requires people from, different disciplines, that you somehow need to make that work. But so perhaps two questions. So the first question is, what issues can working in teams cause for neurodivergent people? And the second question is, how could you as a leader accommodate that?
Yeah, that's a very common question, because they say if people work remote, or they skip the social gatherings, are they still part of a team? So being part of a team is seeing each other a lot, right?
Yeah.
But some people, connecting one-on-one and having more in-depth conversation is their way of connecting. There are different ways of connecting. But for me, very insightful was what Amy Edmondson writes, that we have been working in teams. Working in teams has increased over 50% in the last 20 years.
Yeah, I read it in your book, yeah.
And I also see this in schools. Also, my daughter, she has a lot of projects and groups, and I see that she needs more time alone, but it increased. For some people, keep in mind the natural variety. For some people, this is great because they like to interact, more extrovert people probably, and they like to have this buzz and the working floor and have a lot of interaction, a lot of chit chat. Some people like that. Some people don't. So for the people who like to work in teams and have a lot of feedback and need to think out loud, to create value, for those people it's a good development, but for other people it's not. They just can't hear themselves thinking when they're in a group. They need time to wind off. They need time for themselves to improve their energy. For some kind of people, this really posed a problem because they were just not made for being in teams the entire day, to interact with other people. And they probably connect in a different way. So because the norm is interaction, working in teams, we say that people who are not fit for that they are not social people or shy, but it's not like that. They have a different kind of wiring. They prefer a different kind of connection.
Yeah, and I think they also manage their energy in a different way. It's, I have a lot of colleagues who basically also want to, from time to time, basically retract, reload their batteries and then fully contribute again, as opposed to, constantly being 100% in there.
Yeah, that's exactly the difference between extrovert and introverted people. Where do you get your energy from interaction with other people?
Yeah.
Or from
reflection. Yeah.
Reflection, exactly. So we know these kind of differences, but improving the amount of working together will pose a problem on people like that. Probably also introverted people who really need time for themselves.
Yeah. Hey, and how can you, as a leader, accommodate that? Let's say, for instance, if I have a team and I need to have the opinion and the input from Saskia, but Saskia might not be, let's say, completely at ease to work in a team. How can you ensure that? Do you then, let's say, need to make connection moments of how can you make sure that, let's say, that their voice and their contribution gets a place in work that teams or groups need to deliver? Are there any techniques people can deploy for that?
I have one very practical tip. Just when you organize a meeting, just create like 15 or 20 minutes or maybe 30 minutes for the social kind of people. People really like to have chit chat. How was your weekend? Blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
They have 30 minutes or whatever to interact. And then start the formal meeting with the agenda, with exactly knowing what you're going to do and how the interaction will take place. So structure it like that. You will make a lot of people happy because some people just really need this interaction and talk about their private life.
Yeah, but they want to build a connection, have an idea of we all gel, and yeah.
That's fine. That's okay, but the other side is also okay. So I would always say just split the social part and the content part. This will work for everybody.
Yeah.
But as a leader, you should say, for me, this is normal.
Yeah.
Instead of qualifying the people who are not part of the chit-chat part.
No, I can imagine. Hey, and an associated question is more and more companies are, after COVID-19, forcing is perhaps not the right word, encourage, let's say, their staff to come back to the office. And that's even companies like, advanced technological companies like Zoom, Chat GPT. And the main argument is that having people, let's say, physically in the same location is good for innovation. I can imagine that from a number of neurodivergent people, that's also a far from ideal situation. How do you see the relationship between innovation and physical proximity?
Yeah, that's such a funny question. There's been so much research on this topic, and you say encourage. Well, sometimes it's forcing people to come back. And then we saw after the pandemic, the great resignation in America because people didn't want to go back to the way it was. So that was really a signal. But that said, I think most people would admit that their great ideas come from when they take a shower or they walk the dog or they think, in a very quiet moment, aha.
Yeah, yeah.
Those things
Eureka.
always come at the quiet moments. I think I know it's not true that innovation comes from interaction and we really need to be together to come up with great ideas. And I think it's maybe a combination. My brain works like that. Sometimes I have this epiphany when I'm, I don't know, walking outside, and then I'm going to find people to interact with, to make it better or make other connections. And I think most of the time it works like that. It's a combination. No, if you set put people in the room the entire day, they might brainstorm, but you never have the entire picture because there are people who need a different kind of environment to make the brain in its optimized way.
Yeah.
So no, that's really a fairy tale that we all should be in the office to create value or be innovative. It's not like that. But we really want to think that because it's the norm to get the people back in the office.
Yeah.
It was, but we'll never go back the way it was because people have experienced their new level of energy. They're maybe more happy because they have more flexibility and more influence on creating the context that works for them.
Yeah. Hey, talking about flavors of today and fashion, another big fashion in organizations is agility and agile ways of working. We need to be in agile teams, in scrum teams, in backlogs, and stand-up meetings. And in your book, you make a couple of critical observations what it might mean for neurodivergent people. Can you extrapolate a little bit on what let's say the potential issues are that neurodivergent people face if they're forced to work in a kind of agile environment?
Yeah, you use the word for. Yeah, it's one of my favorite topics because. Yeah, I had to work in an agile Scrum way of working, and I was sitting in Scrum meetings sometimes for 3 hours in a row, and stand-ups that were just not the way it was meant to be. I think it's a good way of working for kind of maybe professions in IT or science, I don't know. But for my job in HR, talent development and learning and development, it's just not fit for it doesn't suit the way I work or the way I need to perform. So it's not always fit for everybody. But what I hear from other people, they say, I heard a dyslexic people say to me, it really threatens my creativity and my identity. So it was really strongly.
Yeah, very personal, yeah.
Very personal. So it really makes me unhappy that when I see things, they're really good at spatial visual thinking. If I see things, the solution, and I really need to put that in all kind of procedures and all kind of user stories, stuff like that, it takes a lot of energy. And for some people, it really works to put things to put their work in small parts, but it's not suitable for all kind of brains. But I thought this is a very good example that it could affect your feeling of identity, of being yourself. And for me, it didn't work. It's I can plan my brain from A, B, C. Sometimes when we could have a chat and I think about something and I think about something else and it will come together, but maybe not in a structured way that's being asked of me if I have to work in an agile way. And a lot of people contacted me from, oh, thank you for stating it like that. I really hate it, or it really hurts my identity or pleasure in work. Yeah.
Because one of the other things I had when I read your book, and by the way, can really highly recommend it to everyone, and we'll put all the details in the show notes. But when I read your book and reflected on it, I thought, isn't there actually another discussion we need to have in the organization, regardless if people are neurotypical or neurodivergent? isn't your book actually not one plea for, let's say, focusing on strengths and have a kind of strengths-based approach for the way that, we ask people to do work in the workplace rather than trying to fit everyone in a hole? So in other words, is the concept of your book of focusing on strengths not something we could take much wider than let's say, perhaps the difference between neurodivergent and neurotypical people?
Well, it's funny you say that, because I think every company will say that they work strength based. Yeah, they say, of course, we want to make use of all the talents we have in our company, but most of the time it's not like that.
No, I agree.
It's what I said about myself. You're so creative. That's just great. But, so it always comes with a but, and things that you should improve. So, it goes further than that. It's really reevaluate your talent development, your recruitment. Just look through a different lens through all your processes. You think you're working strength based, but probably not. Mm-hmm. Within the norm.
Yeah. Hey, two personal questions for you. In your book, you're very open about how you tick, and you also write very literally, it takes one to know one. So to which degree has your own personal neurodiverse profile played a role in the way that you wrote the book, let's say the creative process? That must have been a massive undertaking. So can you say a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, it was one bit of creative burst. I've been writing the book in a few months. It was really productive, and I started with in the morning. It was the entire day. There was nothing else in my life than this book. So I have this hyper focus. There was the only thing in my life. I didn't see any friends or didn't do anything else. I even saw my daughter a bit less than usually. But so this is the hyper focus. Just one thing, and really being productive, connecting the dots, and highly productive. But the fun fact is that when I handed in my manuscript, that the publisher said, "All right, that's just great. Now we need more structure. Now we need structure." And then I said, "Why?" This is my structure. And then I said, no, that's not structure. So we had a lot of fun with the publisher we had fun working together, because we had to find out how our brains worked, what they need to say or ask from me to be productive in the way they hoped I would be. So, and I had to ask for the right guidance. So it was also in this process finding the common ground and the common language to make the best out of it. So they were really good and creating more structure, and there was all kind of hassle in the book. So that was fun. I'm the creative one, productive, and then I need somebody else, to create a structure that other people need. And I really learned that also with doing presentation and things, that people need guidance throughout through your story. So it was, I learned a lot from it, but also had a lot of fun when things like this happen. Why is it not structured? For me, it was
for you, it's absolutely logical, and the flow is there, and
no idea. And now that I see the difference, and it is really a better book because other brains interacted with my brain. Yeah. It was a fun experience. It was a hard experience, but a fun experience. Yeah.
Yeah, they thank you for sharing that. Hey, as I said before, I really, really liked the book. I mean, there are a couple of things that I really liked. I think, first of all, I think it's extremely, your writing style is fantastic. It's extremely clear. It's extremely logic. You use a lot of, let's say, statistical data, a lot of examples, a lot of scientific research. I think it's also very practical. So, I happen to be Dutch, so I was able to read it, of course, in the Dutch language, but I think it deserves really a wider audience. So is there anywhere an English translation in the making?
Of course. Yeah.
Wow, it's good news.
Yeah. So this really will be published probably in 2024. We're working on it. I just need a good title, Dirk, so maybe you can think with me.
I will do that. Yeah, I had something like unleashing all our brain power, something like that. But I will think about it. Yeah.
It was the little translation. I think this won't work. Yeah, but we really had to, and that's what we started off with. You really have to see if it's going to be popular. The publisher won't do a translation if it's not successful. Mm-hmm. Now we know it's successful, and I work a lot with international companies, so I'm really happy that there will be an English translation. So the answer is yes, but none. People, they need to have a bit of patience before they can read it. Yeah.
Now, at least they can listen to this podcast and get an idea of the main concepts. My final question is: we touched on a number of topics about neurodivergency and the workplace. Are there any things we haven't touched on which you think are important to state or to mention?
If you really want to change, if you want to pay attention to this topic, and you should, it's better for the people, it's better for the company, it's better for everybody, because that's what we know. If you pay attention to neurodiversity, this will benefit everybody. But where do you start? You can read the book, you can visit or watch me at a keynote. But the first thing is create awareness within your company, create more empathy, really understanding how brains work and this spiky profile and things like that. And look at all your processes in the organization through this neuro-inclusive lens. And for the employees, but maybe also for customers. That would be my tip. People ask, okay, this is great. What's next? So this is something to keep in mind.
Super. Well, Saskia, thank you very much. I really enjoyed the interview. I learned a lot from it. So thank you very much for your cooperation. And I'm looking forward to your next book, whether that is a book about a new or related topic, or whether that's the English translation. So thank you very much for this interview.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you for having me, and spread the word.
Will do.